Hey guys, welcome to RJ's Android tutorials. Today we're going to go over the very basics of creating your very first app in Android, and you guys are going to see just how easy that it can be. So the first thing you'll need to do is download Android Studio. Just go ahead to Google and type in download Android Studio. The first thing that comes up is the right link. It supports Mac and Windows, so you'll be good to go no matter what. Just click this. It might take a minute to download because it's sort of a large file. I'm not going to re-download it since I already have it, but once you get it installed, you should get a welcome screen that looks something like this. So what you'll need to do is go ahead and click Start a New Android Studio Project, and you'll go through this project wizard. You can call your application whatever you want, so I'm just going to call it My App. And then in this second field, you have a company domain, and this is a lot like the company name you'll want to use for your apps. It will also affect the naming of the folder structure within your app, but I'm just going to go ahead and call mine RJ's Apps, and then it always followed by a .com. That's just the way Android apps are typically formatted. You don't need to include C++ support, and then you just need to make sure that the folder where it's being saved is where you would like it to be. So go ahead and click Next. On this screen you get to pick the lowest version of Android you would like your phone to run on, and this can always be changed in the future, so it's not a huge deal whichever one you pick. I like to pick 5.0 for projects where I'm just messing around, but if you're doing a production application you may want to consider how many users you are leaving out by selecting the version. But there are certain features that aren't available on older phones, so you sort of weigh those considerations. We're going to keep it at 5.0 for today. So go ahead and click Next. Here you see the pre-built projects that Android provides. You can go ahead and jump into a project that already is sort of started out. We're going to go with an empty activity today because that's going to be the easiest starting place for us, but if you see one that you like a little better, you're welcome to try that one. On this page it says creates a new empty activity. An activity is a screen in Android. Every screen that you land on is usually an activity. And so we can go ahead and name it whatever we want. Main activity is just fine. And then this file that it's going to generate is the layout file for that activity. So we always have a Java class and then a layout file. And you'll see what I mean in a second. So go ahead and click Finish to generate the project. It can take a minute for Android Studio to generate the project, but once it gets all the dependencies up and ready to go, it will boot up. You'll see Android Studio still processing down at the bottom. So as long as it still says that, and occasionally your IDE will have these errors, you can submit them to Google if you like, helps them get feedback, but usually they're not breaking, and so you don't need to worry too much about them. If you ever have issues, just go ahead and restart Android Studio, and that should fix most of them. So you can see once nothing is red, you'll know it's pretty much done. So let's do a little exploring. Over here you can see, if you don't see the same thing I see, you may have to click on this projects thing on the side to show or hide this menu. The other thing is on this sidebar we see the two different sort of groups of files that there are in an Android project. Here we have the manifest. The manifest declares all the different activities in your application and just tells you which one of them to start out on. So this code right here, this intent filter, says this is the activity that my app should start on. We only have one activity, so we don't have to worry too much about that. It also has things like the app name, so that was generated for us, and then the app icon. So if we click on this and do find usages, we can see the icon that they use, and the icons are stored in this file right here. You can see here the bitmaps, and it also generates a rounded one for us as well. So that's just good to know. The other important place we're going to look today is, we don't need to touch the manifest, but If you were building a more complex app, you would need to declare all your activities in there. It's also where you declare permissions and things like that. Another interesting place to sort of check out, but we're not going to touch, is this file, this build.gradle file. This is where I said if you ever wanted to change the minimum version of Android, you could adjust it there. You can also adjust the version code, so like if you iterate up, you release some new features, you want to go up to version 2 and 1.1 or something like that, you can do that. It's also where you'll pull in external dependencies, so libraries of code that other people have written that will make your life easier. But like I said, we're not going to touch anything that's already been done for us. They pull in some libraries already to make developing just a little bit easier, and they work great. So the only thing you should see is this main activity. And the only thing this main activity does right now is sets the content view. That means sets the layout that we will see. And so you can see this is just a method on this class AppCompat activity, which is built into the Android support library and extends from activity, which is the screen in Android. So it's basically saying a slightly customized version of screen. And the first thing we do in that screen is we set the layout. So if we go and we look at our layouts, you'll see if you click on the design tab, you'll be able to see what this layout is. Right now it's just a text view at the center of a constraint layout. And it's constrained to the bottom, top, and left, so it's constrained basically right to the center. So we can go ahead and run this app. Now, I already have an emulator running because it takes a minute to start up, but if you don't have any emulators listed, you can go ahead and create a new virtual device. Choose whatever phone you want. Pixel one works well. You may need to download a version of Android if you don't have one downloaded already, and then you'll want to have the ones with Google APIs. So you just click download if you need to, otherwise just select one of the ones that's already installed. And the defaults that they use are great. I already have one though, so I'm not going to create a new one. And you can create lots of different ones for different types of phones. The other thing is if you want to run this on your actual phone, one thing you'll need to do is you'll need to go into the settings of your phone, and then you'll need to go to the bottom into the About phone, and you'll scroll to the bottom again, and then you'll click on this build number 321 until it says, yay, now you're a developer. Then you go back and you go into developer options and you scroll down until you see USB debugging and you click on allow USB debugging. Go ahead and click OK. You'll need to do that in order for it to start showing up. There's also a little prompt that will come up on your phone that says, do you want to trust this device, trust this computer? If it doesn't pop up, make sure it's USB mode, debugging mode is enabled, and then go ahead and unplug it and replug it in. It should pop up, and then you will see it in your connected devices, and you can run this app on your actual phone. So we're going to go ahead and run this on the emulator. It's going to take a minute to build the project and then install it on the emulator. I'm going to go ahead, unable to save settings. So we have some funky little issues going on with my Android Studio, but hopefully that's not something you guys are seeing. Okay, so it should be installing the application right now, installing APK, and it's launching the Instant Run service, launching the activity, and look at that, we have My App, Hello World, so everything's working great. So congratulations, you have now run your very first Android app. But let's go ahead and make some changes to make this just a little bit more of our own. So instead of a text view here, we're going to call this a button instead. And if we look at the design, you can see how things change when we make this a button. So it's going to be a clickable button, and it's going to have a slight elevation. It's just a built-in thing in Android, just like a text view. You can leave it in the same position, or you can try moving it around. I'm just going to leave mine where it is. Now if we go to our main activity, we want to reference our button because we want to do something when you click the button. So if you say button equals my button, you can name your button whatever you like. This is just a variable name to reference your button later. And then we're declaring the type because we know the type is going to be button. And then app compatibility has a method called find view by ID, but we have to give it an ID res. So if we go back to our layout file, we do Android ID at plus ID slash and then button or whatever you want to call it. Now we have a way of referencing that specific view. So we can do r.id.button. You'll see the scheme here for find view by ID is r.id, but our layout files are r.layout, so it just depends on what type of ID you're referencing. Android Studio will generate an integer that's unique to that this ID, so it's button, that's just an alias for us that's human readable, but Android Studio will actually generate a number, and then that's the number that it will find. And the one other thing is you're going to see an error here, and if we click on here it says cast to Android widget button. Find view by ID returns a view type. We know this type is a button. We said it's a button. Because of that, Android Studio needs us to cast it to the correct type. Otherwise, they would have to have a find view by ID button that instead said find button by ID, but you would need one of those for every single possible type of custom view, and that's just not feasible. So instead, the solution is we have to cast every time we find a view. Okay, so now that we have a button variable, we can look through, these are all the different methods that are available on a button. We're going to use the most obvious one, set on click listener. So it says it takes in an on-click listener. If you do Command P, you can see the arguments that the method takes. So we just do new on-click listener. On-click listener is an interface. So it's when we say new, we're generating an anonymous inner class. You don't have to understand that if you don't, but all you need to know is this method will get called every time we click on the button. So when we click on the button, we need to do something. Let's make it fun and interesting. So Android has a built-in feature called Toast, where you can just show a little message at the bottom of the screen. So if we do Toast make text, the first thing it takes in is a context. Main activity is actually an instance of context, but it also has a method called get application context. So you could use that one, or you can say that would be the context for the entire application. If you just want the context for this activity, you do main activity.this. This is usually the better way to do it in an activity, but sometimes we need things that reference the global context, and then we use get application context. And then we can pass in a character sequence or a string res. So we could pass in r.string.appname. That was something that was generated for us. If we go into values strings, app name is my app. I'm going to change to my awesome app. Okay, so now if we go into here and we do the duration is going to be toast.length short and then show. These are just constants that Toast has predefined the length of time you should do it for if you want a short one or a long message pop-up. Actually, instead of using this string reference though, I'm just going to create a new message, and we're going to do making apps is easy. So there we go. You can have any message you want. Now if we click run again, it's going to build our application, and because I actually changed the app string, you'll notice as when it gets reinstalled, I believe the name is going to change, because the name, yep, here it says my awesome ... and it's my awesome app, yep, and the same string is being referenced here. And then if we click on our button, it says making apps is easy, so perfect. So if we see it says hello world and you want to change that, if we go into our main activity, the text of the button is hello world, so we could call it show message. And go ahead and run our app one more time. And once we do that, we will have created our very first Android app. As you can see, it's really not that hard to get something up and running, and hopefully you should be able to get this running on your own Android phones as well. Apps, of course, can get really complicated, but they can also be really simple, and doing simple apps is pretty easy. Throughout this channel, I'm going to make a series of tutorials on breaking down popular apps like the Snapchat app into the simple views that it's composed of and showing you guys how to make them. So if that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel so you get all the updates. And you can also check out the other videos that I have already uploaded. So thank you guys so much, and I hope you have an awesome day.